Internet and Mobile Association of India, along with its sisters organizations, Payments Council of India and Fintech Convergence Council, and National Payments Corporation of India. The fest is presented by the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology, Government of India, and Reserve Bank of India, and is supported by Niti Aayog, Startup India, and Invest India. We would like to thank our platinum partners Visa, AWS, PhonePe, our diamond partner Cred, our country partner Australian government, our track partners HSBC India and Refinitiv India, and our session partner the UK government, Department of International Trade. The second edition of the summit, with the theme Fintech, Empowering a Global Digital Economy, will provide an in depth understanding of the latest businesses, policy, investment, and technology developments within the fintech landscape globally. We welcome you all for the session on Inspiring Insights Diaspora Talk. Without further ado, let us welcome Mr. Varun Mittal, the Global Emerging Market FinTech Leader, ENY, who would be moderating today's discussion. We are even pleased to welcome Mr. Sopnendu Mohanty, the Chief FinTech Officer, Monetary Authority of Singapore. Dear delegates, request you to please keep on posting your questions on the chat box or in the Q&A section. The speakers may pick up a few in the end and answer to your queries. Over to you, Mr. Mittal.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this afternoon. And as we look at the diaspora talk, and one thing I usually say, 1 in 6 person in the world lives in India. And if you look at the diaspora, we'll end up being 1 in 4 or 1 in 5 in the world from that perspective. And with a huge diaspora audience, specifically in financial services, if you look at the global big tech companies as well as global financial service companies, there is a huge diaspora audience. Indian companies and Indians who have gone abroad to list and to expand their businesses. And also the first gen, second gen, and third generation Indians who either went now or their parents went in to set up families and to build businesses there with a deep emotional ties, cultural ties, and historical ties still connected back. And as we look towards that, what is the relevance of that? How can we bring that diaspora together to support a billion ideas, to build for the world from India, to make India as a center for innovation for global fintech opportunities? I would like to take this opportunity to put the first question to Sopnendu. As we look at the first generation Indians, the ones who've just moved or the ones who moved with their parents earlier, and how they integrate culturally, how do they hire staff, international staff and Indian staff? How have you seen that different themes come along and key differences in those approaches since you interact with thousands of startups every year?
Hi, Varun. Thanks for having me. And it's quite a big festival now from last year. So good to see a lot of expansive topics. Well, that question you asked is quite a tricky one because it's hard to segregate between, as you said, the first generation Indian and the new one who have just arrived for professional reasons and how they do it. Well, I think the question in my mind is deep a cultural question, because as you spend a huge amount of time of your lifespan in a particular country, some of the cultural homogeneity starts getting into your own character, and you represent that country in every aspect, whether from culturally, from the economic need, the social need, and the demand of the market. So you are representing that country in many, and that's the primary starting point. And when this startup founders, when they build firms, when they start looking at Indian diaspora, they do look at in a much more balanced lens. Especially the question asked on the hiring, because ultimately in our sector, the tech sector, the only thing sells is what you know, your skill set. What doesn't really matter is where you come from and what's your background, and it's a binary hiring. It's a binary hiring, 0 or 1. You know or you don't know it. So because of that uniqueness of tech characteristics, largely whether it's hiring or building the team or building the company or building a network of opportunity of organizational expansion, It is going to be still a skill-based thinking, and they will look for people who are able to appreciate the market need, understand the rule of the law, rule of the land, understand what is required to integrate with the social fabric of the market where they have settled down. So these factors continue. So I don't see much of difference there. But generally speaking, in our sector, we are privileged that here we still believe skills, knowledge, and understanding your customer does precedes any other factors.
Absolutely. And as the connected part to that is also capital, because a lot of capital, as we say, there are two kind of non-resident Indians, two kind of NRIs, non-resident Indians and non-returning Indians, and
Hmm.
a capital flow attached to that. So, do you see any specific trends around how Indians who've settled abroad are putting capital back to build the ventures back, or the Indians inside India putting capital outside to build the ventures and using capital as a bridge for global
Yes.
collaboration?
But definitely, I think a lot of people who understand India, whether through old family ties or historical family ties, they do deploy a lot of the capital for interesting projects which comes out of India. Absolutely, there's no doubt about that. And it is why not? And it doesn't matter whether from India or not India. India is a growing market. It's a vibrant market. There's 1.34 billion people. It's growing despite COVID. The amount of India's recovery has happened through this whole thanks to the digital infrastructure India has. Especially, you see the record funding round going in India, which just blows our mind up. Which means India has a huge appetite to attract global capital. And if you are an Indian origin founder and who has a lot of capital, why you want to miss the bus? You also want to play into the party and deploy more capital. Perhaps I think they would stand to be more thoughtful because they understand to some extent the market dynamics in India. So definitely that's a flow will continue to happen. And even the reverse one will work because money coming out of India for expansion to other opportunity outside India is still we are seeing very lot of family offices are looking at opportunities to invest on assets in out of Singapore in many of the Asian ASEAN opportunities coming up in the digital space. So you will see capital flow both sides. Family offices coming out, family offices getting into India. Well, India's appetite for more capital is kind of still a huge capacities out there, and I'm sure capital will flow. So do the Indians who have a lot of capital to deploy will push their investment back in India, and that's a natural place for them to do.
Absolutely. And post liberalization in 1991, there used to be a saying that a brain drain is better than brain in drain.
Yeah.
When it was a put a question that a lot of educated people from the IITs, IIMs are leaving and stuff. 30 years have passed since liberalization of Indian economy from that perspective. Do you still believe that that the adage still holds, or it's a reverse brain drain time?
I would say the world is far more connected, far more. It's not that black and white anymore. We are far more connected, far more diffused in this whole space, and opportunities, especially in the digital space. It's a place where large market, large capacity is going to drive the narrative. India being so large and the opportunity being so large, I think the whole brain drain where they're getting educated, where they're getting growing up doesn't really matter. Capital flow will hit India. India is still a long way to go in terms of upgrading infrastructure. Still long way to drive financial inclusion. Still long way to improve the financial sector and bring a much more larger people to the sole fabric of financial services. So I think the brain drain is a moot point now. It's a far better situation we see today, and doesn't really matter where they are, and we're still going to find a path to get back to India and contribute.
So you believe that the Swadesh moment for fintech is finally here?
Because fintech, look, we can't ignore the fact that China, India, Indonesia, uh, I will say a certain, you take whether part of Africa, these are the market fintechs are going to look forward to. The market forces are so attractive. and it has this immense capacity to grow. So I can't see any other way, rather seeing that fintechs and the capital and the quote unquote Indian capital will move back to country to improve the infrastructure.
The other part is usually it's said that the two parts which are very unique about Indian founders or Indian companies is they grow out of so much struggle, and where they grow with the system, but also with the presence of system, the kind of struggle and stuff, and that struggle and the grit gives them
Hmm.
an ability to succeed
Yes,
globally.
yes.
How much do you think is that real? Is that
I would say it's largely real because all of us, I mean, my own journey has been that we have seen life in a wide spectrum, and uh, our ability to to deal with complex situation, complicated outcomes, very complicated set of emotions and people is quite a large exposure we have back in India. I think that does helps a lot, especially for a startup founder. You got to have that grit because you are going to survive. I mean, a lot of startups look very cool. They go to this fancy place. They look very happy. They're carrying this lovely computer, but their life is very miserable when they go back home. There's no client to talk to get revenue. They have to struggle. They have to keep the story going. They have to keep the investors interested. It's a very struggling phase of the life, and I think Indians founders have shown a greater tenacity and much more stronger resilience to deal with this uncertainty and challenge of being a startup founder. And again, you're going to deal with this market of similar emerging market, emerging challenges, and you've got to have that resilience. And I've also seen the ability to pivot to new things, to learn something, pick up a new tech skills, pick up a new skill set so that you get into the market. I mean, I have seen so many people pivoting in the fintech sector from payments to advisory to capital market. Means that ability to shift the gear at a speed is quite unique to the Indian diaspora. And I think that's our strength. Sometimes that also becomes a weakness. So we don't really, sometimes we can confuse ourselves and we don't go that deep to solve a particular problem. But, well, there's always a plus and minus to anything in life. But broadly speaking, yes, that exposure we have to the wide spectrum of challenges does build a strong character among us to be far more successful than others.
and if you look at what are the things which you think they can learn from diaspora, specifically the people who have been working or growing in different cultures. So if they have the, I would say, fire and grit with them, what can they pick from
My,
the
my,
diaspora?
Very good question. One of the things I would strongly advocate, especially a successful people in the diaspora, is respect for local values. You must find a way if you're working on this in a country to able to integrate yourself genuinely, not like some artists, genuinely integrate with the local values, local need, and find a space for yourself in that narrative. That's one. Second, I think, look, we're a country called emerging market. We have a lot of EQ in our DNA. Use that EQ to get a better appreciation of our own contribution to the society. I think generally we have a strong EQ if we know how to use it. Second, I think we have to share a lot of pompous and prideness to the back pocket. I think there is a lot of need for being humble, being not rude to each other in our day-to-day interactions. Sometimes we get very abrasive because we think we figured out everything. But the successful ones I have seen who are far more kind and far more empathetic to people around them, especially founders who knows how to. I mean, there was a time it was highly romanticized to be abrasive. I don't care. Follow your heart. I am unique and I can be very different. I don't care what people around me think. But in our sector, in fintech sector, we got to take people around us. So successful founders are people who have taken the community around them together, moved the narrative as if they're part in solving a larger problem.
That makes absolute sense. And if I connect something to that, one thing which I've heard from a lot of folks in diaspora is a lot of Indian founders have technically kind of become complacent because of India stack. KYC done, payment infra done, GST done, health stack done. So you get so many things, and you have technically you try to go to any of the other emerging markets, and you're like, shit, none of these blocks are there. How much do you think the India stack, for all its good things, is actually making the founders and the companies here complacent?
Well, India Stack, and let's appreciate India Stack is truly a global template for how a foundational stack should look like. And India, I think India should take the credit of at least defining what a stack should look like. The digital identity, the interoperable payment system. But later on, countries like Singapore added to that narrative. We built on top of that the data exchange idea. We built on top of that the consent idea. So where India Stack did start the base foundational construct, countries like Singapore came and adapted some of the learnings and built an expansive stack. There's one way to consider that India Stack did create that necessary infrastructure for the startup founders to build product which was truly game changing in the market. Now, when you carry that narrative outside India, I think sometimes it's very important to take a step back and do some reality check and be thoughtful about how you position yourself. Because if you truly want to build a soft India export of tech stack, I think the proof is in the actual reality. When you're going to see in how many countries outside India, the India stack has been implemented. It's still
Less than 10 globally.
So I think there is an opportunity to expand that. There's an opportunity to expand that India Stack construct, and for all good reasons, because India Stack is highly economical in this.
I mean, it's like a silver spoon. It's
Yeah.
great. It's silver spoon, but then you forget to eat from a wooden spoon.
Like Mr. Jawad Ashraf, former High Commissioner, would say, it was a $1 identity cost structure system. So definitely, we in Singapore have a joint working agreement with Singapore with the Indian government on finding a collaborative way to promote the stack. And both countries are working together to build what we call as a foundational infrastructure construct. And as you see last week, UPI was finally going to get connected to a domestic payment system of similar construct, which will be Singapore early next year. As India Rails, India Stack components get connected to this market, then the credibility will improve, because then this people will see and what impact it can make to the global connectivity as the stacks get connected. So I think that narrative should be, yes, be proud of what has been achieved, but start finding a way to collaborate with other market, bring along different market conditions, and find a common purpose so that the standards and the construct can be well adopted globally by many countries. And I think India Stack team are largely moving in that direction. Especially, I must give credit to NPCI, the fabulous team partners they are till now, and I think our India Singapore connectivity of UPI PayNow will truly define, especially cross-border connectivity at a scale which will become a template for many countries to look at.
Absolutely, and there's a question also related to that from the audience. So, what kind of business opportunities you see? Because one way to look at is this: what does fintech? What can fintechs access that infra, or does it compete with them? Because a lot of fintechs were trying to build remittance infra in corridors like Singapore, India. So, is it more of the government competing with the private sector in a way?
But I mean, that question has been put to me many times. Are we cannibalizing private companies in the payment space? My answer is I'll say big no. I will say why. Because for two reasons. Why? Because there is a foundational rail which needs to be built, and we cannot grow fintech on back of inefficient processes and system. That is called arbitration of poor infrastructure. Okay, you can't arbitrate a poor infrastructure and say that's a great business model. I'm making tons of money. Well, good, and it is good as long as you're making money, but that's not really from where as a policymaker, it
It's an
doesn't.
arbitrage business. That's not a value accretive business.
Yeah, you can't arbitrage this inefficiency. As a policymaker, it becomes tough for me to say you are arbitraging Singapore's inefficiency to make money. Well, that's well and good till I get it fixed. So countries are going to fix the foundational foundational infrastructure so that you can build value add application on top of that. So, as I have told in many of the panels, four things countries will focus and they'll build at public realm. Your national digital identity infrastructure, it will not be left to many private. Of course, there's a use case, there are cases for other private identity mechanism, but let's say, for sake of simplicity, digital identity will be a one infrastructure. Second, interoperable payment system, Rails, particularly, not what is built on top of that. Third, data gateway, which allows different data to be published and exchanged to third party in a thoughtful way. And fourth is a clear electronic consent system, especially in digital world, when you're consenting data to third party and you should have some control over the data. Now, these are the foundational infrastructure to be built, and the next step will get connected. So you're not going to arbitrage of a lack of infrastructure to build a product. What will happen is once these systems get connected, there will be an opportunity for founders to build on top of that value-added services. And I was telling you before this call how I got impressed that a foundational rail like PayNow created an opportunity for paying for a government services in a seamless way. I think that's where we will see the industry going. And I don't believe we are substituting credible or real economic activity by putting public infrastructure. We are fixing the inefficiencies which a lot of fintechs are arbitraging the situation now.
Absolutely. And when I go back to the talent part, which we talked about, if you look at China, a lot of people from China would study in the US and then go back to China to build companies. We do not see a lot of Indians actually going back and setting up companies. We see they leaving and then setting up companies. The reverse part has not happened. Is there a specific reason, or you believe that there are already so many people based in India building so many companies that the diaspora is probably nervous to go and compete with them and have lost a bit of grit to go back to
Well,
fight?
well, I think the Indian opportunity has proven has given this at least created the situation now that a lot of talented Indian will head back to India to build something back in India, because they're just like any other entrepreneur who wants to make the next big move. So India is in a very unique position to see a lot of people heading back to do something there purely from entrepreneurial need. So yes, the China example was perfect. That's the reason why we find in China all the brightest Chinese talent are in China. They actually do building great infrastructure for their country. They are, if you go to China to small cities, you can see for yourself how wonderful their infrastructure is. From everywhere, from town to big town, their digital infrastructure and their physical infrastructure, because bright talent are back at home and doing great job. Will India have a similar approach? Well, there are different history, different path. India is now in that stage where you see a lot of bright Indian mind entrepreneurs heading doing something out of India, and I hope that creates that same outcome you see in China today. But different path, different historical uh, nuances to all these things. Very complicated topic.
So,
Anything I
so,
say can get
no,
twisted.
so one I will have a viewpoint to that the Chinese market is a lot more closed. So if the diaspora goes back, they know that they have a captive market to cater to, and because India market is so open, from that perspective, so there is not like a significant advantage to move back to build it back home when you can almost like be like have your foot in the two boats kind of structure. So is that the inherent difference between the super open nature of economy versus a semi or limited openness of economy a difference?
No, Varun, I think we are simplifying the challenges here because I mean there is a language homogeneity. There's a whole set of uniqueness to this market, and that uniqueness to the market impacts how people contribute to the market. India is quite diverse in many ways. There's no homogeneity of life. It's different language, different culture, different level of progress by different states. There's so much of heterogeneous factors in India. It's hard to compare with China and say that this is working there and this is working here. So let's figure out who's doing well. So India has its own challenges, own opportunities, but I think what India is still doing well is producing a lot of good talent. And what if I have to say, India has to watch out for the quality of the education at different levels. So that we have a lot of uh, human resource to be ready to be upskilled in the right way. And if we can get that skilling process right, India will be a huge talent pool for world to tap into, and same time find opportunity back in India. So I think I don't want to make the argument to a simple contrast to China. It is just unfair for both the country, and it may not give the right message to people who are trying to fix their respective market.
No, absolutely, absolutely makes sense. And if because you mentioned the Indian education system, if you were to suggest three, four things which can be added to the curriculum or the way of learning, what would those things be?
I think one thing I would like to see more is how do we upgrade our vocational skill set or practical skill set, industrial experience skill set in our curriculum. I think that will add to a lot, because today, as you know, the market demand is for you got to be useful from day one you land in the company, right? And with the growth of this startup ecosystem, which is perhaps going to be the biggest uh, provider of jobs, they would expect resources coming to them. Doesn't matter whether you're fresh out of college or coming in midway. You got to have a skill set so you become valuable to the company from the day one you land in the company. So you got to have that clearly articulated skill set which you are picking up either from your own upgrading skills through using the institutes in India, wherever you are. And the second part I would say is that definitely you got to think about how to sharpen the curriculum itself. A lot of times the curriculum needs a refresh to the changing need of the market demand, and see whether that can be fixed.
Absolutely, that's super useful. And in terms of broader policy changes, do you think are there specific capital or ease of doing policy changes in principle which could help accelerate some of these changes? Because one thing is like international taxation will be different. So if can special economic zone or tax holidays for international diaspora to come back, would some of those initiatives be would
You have put a long list of what can be done. Well, that's I'm sure.
I'm very ambitious man.
No, no. Look. There are a lot of things you just rattled off. I think is already there in India. The special economic zone is there, and there are a lot of incentive coming. Every state is pitching. I remember last year before COVID in Singapore, every month one state will be landing up one state team with the secretaries and the ministers who will landing in Singapore, pitching how good their state is, and all the incentives they're providing so that people can open shops back in the state, which I was thought very interesting because every state is competing for attracting investments and opportunities back in the home state. So to me, that was a great learning and great exposure to see how Indian states are fighting for space in international markets. I think that how unfortunately COVID has stopped all this thing. I hope once things get normal, the states are going to come and pitch outside, come to our state and do great things. So let that competitiveness stay on. And I'm sure policymakers will sharpen their policy thinking incentives to the need as we progress.
Absolutely, and the Indian grid shows up even for the states competing with each other. So the fighter spirit is present at every level.
That's true. That's true. So I think, yeah. So that's how it should be.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Sopnendu. I think we are out of time. Really
Yes, yes.
appreciate really appreciate your candid responses, and thank you everybody for
So
joining
thanks for
us.
having me.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Mohanty and Mr. Mittal, for joining in today and making this session possible. And indeed, this was an inspiring insights provided by you, Mr. Mohanty, and thank you so much, Mr. Mittal, for moderating this. Just wanted to thank all the delegates, for joining in for this session, and would request you all to be stay tuned for the various sessions which are going to happen in the next couple of minutes. Thank you so much and have a nice day. Thank you.
Thank you.